Brr, a hobbit. It's Washington cold outside right now. But here we are. It's warm in here. And we're going to expand on some of the things that I brought out in the first segment. I'm going to show you some measurements on barrels so that you know kind of what we're talking about. We're going to start with barrel joint motion, just because we have to start somewhere. And as I mentioned before, as I'm trying to do this in the spirit of Harold Vaughn. Harold is a guy whose opinion I've respected a lot, and he wrote a book called Rifle Accuracy Facts, which we talked about a little bit before. I'm kind of disjointed this morning. And in it, he took apart the rifle paradigm bit by bit, and just he took up an approach that I consider to be novel at the time. He said, let's look at the problem of accuracy, actual accuracy, real accuracy. And like me, he was learning as he went. When he wrote the book, when he started the book, he didn't know as much about accuracy. All he knew was that the guns that he had experience with were not accurate to the point that he wanted. So he set out to explore that. He got involved with the bench rest crowd. He got involved with people who understand real accuracy. And that's a very, very, very small subset of humans. I went to gunsmithing school. Of course, I get kicked out. But I was head of the class, top of the class, thought I was the best rifle builder, accuracy builder in the world. Accurized everything, you know, Remingtons mainly, and had the normal person's excuses about accuracy. I'd get a flyer and it was this, it was that. It was, you know, I didn't recognize the shape of groups. So now that I've experienced actual accuracy, and I have an actual baseline against which to compare all these different guns, I've spent the last 20 years trying to fix the problems, trying to take the stuff that's been learned in the bench rest realm and apply it to things bigger. So, the first thing we're going to talk about is barrel joint movement, because Harold gets into this and it doesn't seem like a big deal, but trust me, it really, really is. And I'm going to pan the camera down. Well, maybe I won't for a minute. The barrel joint movement that I'm talking about, if we just grab an action here and we screw a barrel into it. Let's just start with explaining what it is that we're talking about. If I can get this thing to start here. There we go. This is how a barreled action goes together. This is something that most people aren't really familiar with because they've never, never had a gun apart to this point. I'm going to go ahead and bring this focus in a ways here so that we can see what we're talking about. Generally speaking, Remington clone actions, most round actions in the world, measure inch 350. They're called inch 350 actions. They're 1.35 inches in diameter. You'll notice that this recoil lug right here is inch 350. You'll also notice that this barrel is quite a lot smaller. This is a bench rest barrel. This happens to be, if memory serves, a Krieger light varmint from Bruno. Never been fired. I'll just leave this lay here for the sake of discussion. So I've mentioned before in my videos as how I order up inch 350 barrels. I'm going to show you what that means. I've got some builds here that are not even okay. There are things about this build that are going to be hard to recognize. But the first thing that I want to point out is the fact that, well, first of all, let's go to the fact that this happens to be not an inch 350 action. This is a Stiller TAC 338 action. And it therefore is, I don't remember, inch 375, something like that. But this is an inch 350 barrel shank. When I say inch 350 barrel, I'm talking about this portion right here, which is the shank. These are custom, well, that's custom built for reasons of my own. This is a pull down recoil lug. And you'll notice that they all plane out. This barrel was ordered specifically as an inch 350 shanked barrel. The problem with that is, and that's what we're going to do, we're going to go through and we're going to find the problems and eliminate the problems. The biggest problem here is that inch 350 barrels are few and far between. Only 3 or 4 of the companies out there routinely build them. I'm going to bring in another one here just so that you could see. This is another, I don't know, current build, something going on. This is an inch 350 action. This will be a Kelbley tactical something or another. This is inch 350. The recoil lug is inch 350. And the barrel shank is inch 350. This is just a thrown together gun it's for illustration purposes, it's for resale, it's a 300 WSM. Barrel hasn't even been lettered yet. But I wanted to show you how this extended pick rail goes right out over the top of that inch 350. I'm just showing you the actual, before we pan down to all the barrels on the table, which are normal sized barrels. I'm going to show you some inch 350s just to see. I strive to get this joint right here to match in diameter, and I'll try to explain why to you because I believe it's important. Okay, so we're going to pan down and we're going to just show you a selection of barrels, hopefully. Now, earlier on in these segments, one of the first things I did was when I set out to go build some guns, I'm going to go build these guns and we're going to shoot them and know life's going to be cool and it's going to be so wicked awesome. It didn't work out that way. I started with a variety of actions and I ran into problems right away because, first of all, let me explain to you, let's understand why I consider this inch 350 situation to be a problem. Here's a barrel right here. Try to be careful so the name doesn't show. Let's see here. You can't see this unless I get the light just right, but if I get the light just right, you're going to see, boy, light and focus. I don't know if we can get it. But take my word for it, this surface right here, this little step right here is flared. It's flared somewhat. It actually goes, this has been compressed. It's been shoved in a little bit. Got the clarity here? And the reason is, it's too small. This is a fantastic gun. This is a winning gun. This gun has got no issues other than the fact that this little step right here, because this is an inch 2 shank. This is a 1 inch, 1.06, stepped up to an inch 2. Basically, you've only got 1/10 of an inch of bearing surface around here. So when you tighten this joint, you have to be careful not to deform this leading edge right here. This is the edge that butts up against the action. Finally fitted everything. This gun, when it was new, shot beautifully. I took the barrel off, put it back on, it didn't shoot as well. I had to tighten the barrel. It came with the barrel very, very tight. And through the course of the years, as I learned to tighten this, I would say that this 1/10 of an inch shank abutment surface here is designed for taking maybe 70 foot-pounds of force. If I tighten this down to more than 70 foot-pounds, it will tend to start deforming that shoulder. Now, this barrel has been tightened beyond that. We won't get into the why or the how. Let's just say I did it. Let's say that I tightened this thing. Doesn't matter. I remember the first time well, let's not get into stories. Stories don't matter. But as I'm talking and wiggling, I'm hoping that we get into a situation where you can see that there's a tiny amount of flare. Now this gun still shoots. This barrel still shoots. But I put indexing marks on it, and I have to tighten it to a specific place. And what happened is, I have some more of these, and some of them are in 6x47 Lapua. This particular one is in a PPC, so it didn't have to be that tight, and it held up just fine. 6x47 Lapua has a larger recoil impulse. Now, to normal people, they might say, well, people just do say it makes no difference. Well, unfortunately, the simple fact is that the recoil impulse on the 6x47 cartridge produces more stress on this joint than the 6PPC. Now, when I say the stress on this joint, let's go back to my little thing that I've got here. The chamber of the gun is inside of here. Boom, in this section right here. When that 50, 60, 70, 80,000 psi hits it, it expands. I actually have a couple of Ehler 43 systems in such that I can put a strain gauge on here or a strain gauge on here. And a strain gauge is a thing that you epoxy down, and then it measures stretch or stress or strain. When this expands, it stretches. It gets bigger. It expands. And that stretches the piece of tape or the sensor. And I take a reading. And it's a way of gauging. It's not a measurement of any sort. Understand, I measure very little because I suck at measuring. So do you. Everybody does, but that's neither here nor there. But here we have this situation where I have an 1.2 inch barrel shank. I don't want to distort it. So this is one of my fixes. I've got a thing going here that we'll talk about later. This is all going to be a part of the build. But the problem we're addressing is the fact that when this stretches, because it's by dint of the fact that it's an internal combustion engine, it expands in every direction. On your car motor, boom, the fuel burns, and it pushes a piston. Boom, and then it exhausts. Boom, and then it exhausts. Boom. In this case, boom, and it pushes a bullet out the barrel. This here remains locked and immobile. But does it really? In fact, there's many pounds exerted on this joint, and it tries to spread it. Now, to understand how screws work, most people don't, but a screwed together assembly works such that this is an inclined plane. The threads going around and around and around and around and around are an inclined plane. As you tighten this screw down, okay, you reach a certain point, and if we have washers in here, we turn this until we stretch the screw enough that the forces exerted on that screw can't allow it to loosen. You might need to read about this. I came into this blind. I'm not explaining myself well. But if you're a race car guy, you're going to understand that when you change the heads on your race car, you buy a new set of head bolts, and they're designed to be used one time, because you bolt your head down you stretch all the bolts. I'm making this motion to indicate that it's stretching and sucking up. You stretch every bolt almost to the point of yield. This is why head bolts and head studs can only be used once. Some old racer out there goes, I use studs 5 or 6 times. I don't care. The simple fact is that if the stresses involved working against the bolt upset the joint enough, when it collapses back, when the pressure goes away, there's a tendency for that joint to move. What happens here is, if the pressure inside disengages these surfaces, and then the bullet leaves, the pressure falls, this is gapped. As the barrel collapses back, or that joint collapses back, a number of things can happen. It can turn, and it can reseat itself in a different place, or it can tighten. People who have shot a lot hand tight will see that you can hand tighten a barrel, just put it together, go out and shoot it, come back, and it'll be so tight you have to take it off with a wrench. That's because we have a right hand twist, that joint comes apart, and as it relaxes back, it's got some residual stresses in it, and it tightens up, and it tightens up, and it tightens up, and it tightens up. It actually shoots tighter and tighter and tighter. Every shot, boom, 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 boom. It advances incrementally. So, in that light, back when I started this mess, I did a bunch of testing on barrel nuts. And I took a bunch of brand new barrels, and I fitted them to a Nuvo action, and they were threaded. I was using barrel nuts. Now, I'm a tightwad, and so I decided to try reuse some of these barrels. Just because of who I am, because barrels are dear to me, money's dear to me, I work hard for it. So what we've done, some of these have been, I'm almost ashamed to show some, they've got interrupted thread patterns. We got stuff going here like you would not believe. This right here is a threaded sleeve that I threaded way over tight. And I ran it up and I put something called Loctite 680 in there. I butted it up, I ran it up tight, I threaded it against a joint, and I flared it. We now have inch 350 diameter. Look at the bearing surface on that guy. Okay, I can now tighten this up without deformation. Here's another one, and this is the same. These are just ways that I'm trying to save barrels. This was a Krieger fitted to a Borden TPE. And when I shot it, when I tested the barrel nutting, I'm convinced that the barrel nuts produce a coaxial motion. If this is a barrel nut, this is a nut, by the way. I had to build and thread this nut, making a butting surface on here. This barrel, by the time we get down to this point right here, is about 1.19" or something. I think it's even under 1.2". But I got enough of an abutting surface there. I pulled this out and ran it right up tight. This is a tightly threaded and sleeved on. I'll show you this 680 stuff. No, I won't. It's out by... So, suffice it to say that these are a bunch of barrels that I'm setting up. This one right here will be set up like this one right here. That surface right there is a super tight fit on a sleeving assembly that I'm going to sleeve on. It's got a pretty good size abutment surface, but more than that, this is going to be sleeved and glued. So what I'm doing here, these are just showing you some of my crazy abortive efforts at trying to produce a larger abutting surface and tapering down. Ugly, but what are you going to do? I mean, it's a $400 blank. This one is actually not. This is a shilling, so $300. But it doesn't matter. They're expensive. These have been fired a few times. These are ongoing projects. And as I leave, I'm going to just tell you that this right here is epoxied on, which creates a whole bunch of problems. But I want to tell you that epoxy doesn't do it. This happens to be an 1.2" shank. And this has something called Loctite 680 under it. It's machined to a very good fit. We've got a 90-degree tight corner bearing against this 0.1 surface here, and we have a 0.3 surface back here. Now the problem is I have to time it so that it tightens down. This lug has also been modified. It's got a pull-down tuning assembly. Some of you are going to be asking, what's this, what's that? But what I'm going about here is, I believe that a barrel joint must be tightened to 150 foot-pounds on a big cartridge to not upset. And this small abutting surface won't take 150 foot-pounds. So this is a picture of a bunch of crap that I put together to approach that. I've got dozens more here too, but these are some ones that are, you can see my different ways of trying to produce a big enough surface here that we can torque down to 150 foot-pounds without deforming that shank. The reason for that torquing down is to keep from upsetting. Upset, move over. Upset, move over. This is a source of inaccuracy in guns, is barrel abutment surfaces that are not torqued properly. So that'll be the end of this segment. We'll pick up and go point by point and start breaking this stuff down as we go.